Lesson 2, criteria for acceptable performance documentation. Outside of the performance review conversation, managers often talk to employees about performance issues, and it's important to document those conversations. We talked already about different strategies to keep track of notes and points that you'll bring up and cover in the review that you write. We talked about using an app or a piece of paper that you store in a file somewhere, or a Word document on your computer, an Excel file, whatever you feel comfortable with. But include some details when you write down the conversation. The date that you had the conversation, a complete description of the issue you discussed, a note about any previous conversations you might have had, a statement about what would happen if the problem is not addressed or corrected, if it is in fact a problem, maybe a record of the employee's agreement to work on a problem or to continue to focus on the excellent work that they've done. So acceptable performance documentation includes enough information and uses specific objective language. So there are some criteria. Acceptable documentation achieves these specific aims. It describes behavior, performance, and results, okay? So it explains and illustrates and supports the evaluator's conclusions. It documents agreements and expectations. It tells employees clearly what they're doing well and what they need to improve. And it documents learning plans or other expectations for growth. So let's look at some examples and determine whether these examples meet these criteria. What about Cecile's clothing is inappropriate? Does that meet the criteria of being objective and specific and an observation? Or is that maybe my own personal conclusion or my opinion? I would say Cecile's clothing is inappropriate, perhaps is an unsupported opinion. Instead, you want to turn that into something specific that you documented, that you saw. Because in case Cecile comes back and says, what happened? I'm not sure what you're talking about. When did I do that? You've never told me that before. Anything, you just want to know that you've had that, you want to document the fact that you've had that conversation already. And it's not your opinion, it's a fact, and it's specifically pulled from a conversation or an experience. So maybe instead, Cecile often wears jeans and sandals or sneakers to work, although she's been told that the dress code prohibits such casual clothing for customer service staff. Okay, so obviously just an example. We're just using this one as an example, but often you may want to look at that word often too. So you can take these examples and improve them even more. So you may say, you may want a specific date there instead of often. And you want to know that if Cecile came back and asked you a question, that you'd have all the data in front of you. So they can also be positive, right? But just still lacking enough information. Daniel is very reliable. It's a great thing to say about Daniel, but Daniel can't take that information and apply it to improve his performance because he doesn't really have a very good sense of specifically what he's doing to show that he's reliable. Instead, if you told Daniel, or you made a note that Daniel is at his desk and ready to work by 8:30 every morning, you're showing how reliable he is. So maybe you start off with, Daniel is very reliable. He is at his desk ready to work by 8:30 every morning. And you use both statements. Okay, but acceptable documentation includes explanation, observation, and specific information. Because the point is that we want to avoid an employee getting information and not understanding or having too many unanswered questions. So here's the question. Let's read through this one and ask, if you were Melanie, what kinds of questions would you have about this documentation? So Melanie's work over the last 6 months has been generally good, but she needs to improve her performance in some areas. She likes her job, and she's popular with the other staff. At first, she made too many errors in her figures, but she didn't mind being told about them and is doing better. She spends a lot of time on the computer surfing the web and sending messages that are not work-related to the rest of the staff. She's very good with customers and with computers. Looking at her desk, it's obvious that she has to work on her organizing skills. Now, if you were Melanie, you'd probably have some questions. What questions might you have? Maybe you'd want to know about some areas. What are the some areas that need improvement? How do you know she likes her, if I'm Melanie, I want to know, how do you know I like my job and I'm popular? What is too many errors? And how do you know that I'm spending a lot of time on the computer surfing the web and sending unrelated messages? And thanks for saying that I'm good with customers and with computers. Are there any examples that I could use so that I could continue or focus more on that kind of positive behavior? And then what do my organizing skills have to do with it? Again, if I'm Melanie. Now let's shift our focus. Let's pretend that we're HR. And this piece of documentation just came in, and you're doing a quick review. You also have some questions. You're asking some questions about the person who wrote this document, right? About Melanie. So there's some language here that can be improved. Again, Melanie might ask, how do you know that I spend time web surfing, right? What's wrong with my organizing skills? And what's wrong with the condition of my desk? And if you're in HR, you might want to ask some other questions, right? So in what specific ways does Melanie need to improve her performance? So it's great that you took the time, of course, to write the document. That's part of your responsibility as a manager. But your other responsibility is to give Melanie feedback that she can actually use to improve her performance. And there's not enough specific here. So how do you know that Melanie likes her job and is popular with other people? And what specific kinds of errors did Melanie make? And how many errors did she make and over what period of time? So when we talk about acceptable performance documentation, we need to use complete descriptions, objective, complete examples, and we're going to talk more about using descriptive language next.